Excellent. Well, I'm sure some more people will roll in as we keep going. I'll take some time just to introduce myself very quickly. I'm Chris Melfi. I'm the policy coordinator here at FASD United. I'm stationed here in Washington, D.C., but I come from upstate New York. I'm joined by FASD United COO Jen Wisdall, who I'm sure everyone knows, and she's out in Washington State, as well as Susan Shepard Carlson, our immediate past board chair and leader of our policy team. And today, I believe she is in Florida. Jen, I can pass it over to you for some other quick organization updates.
Sure. Well, we are, and I know this will be covered on a slide in just a couple of minutes, but we are gearing up for the 9th International Research Conference on FASD. There's still room, and we really hope that anybody that was kind of on the fence about maybe attending might decide to still go. We have more speakers than we've ever had for one of these conferences. We've just got some really great talks coming out and research being presented. There's going to be a discussion with the authors of the Lancet article on renaming FASD. There's going to be just some really kind of cutting edge things happening there. So and definitely appropriate for researchers, appropriate for clinicians, but also appropriate for families and caregivers and people with FASD. Come and hear about it. It's a very welcoming and inclusive environment. So that's coming up in Seattle in just a few weeks, March 20th through 23rd. So on our website, there's all kinds of information about that. I will pass it back to you, Chris.
Thank you. Provide a very brief affiliate update. Our affiliate director, Musa, is running just a bit late, but he wanted me to let everyone know that he's busy working on a grant that will help build social media and communications capacity for the affiliate network, which is something he's very excited for. I'm not sure if Carl or Rachel are on the call. I can't see the participant list, but if they are, I would invite one of them to speak about what's going on with the affiliate network if they're interested, or Jen, if you have anything else to add.
No, it's a very vibrant bunch. I urge you that if you are part of an organization that hasn't joined the affiliate network, check in with Musa and think about joining.
Thank you, Jen. I will skip over our conference slide because I know you already gave some good information on that. If you have any questions at all about that, definitely check out the website or give us a call here. I'll be the one to pick up the phone and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. We'll move on over to a quick update from Emma Baldwin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emma Baldwin. I'm the Development Associate at FASD United. And my biggest announcement is that the FASD white paper, so the kind of summation of perspectives and conversation from the symposium during Impact Week in 2024 is finished. So all of the perspectives shared during that day were taken, organized, made themes out of, and then turned into updated recommendations that were reviewed by the engagers, so the people who facilitated the discussions that day, and then also reviewed by a team of reviewers who is made up of researchers, a couple organizational representatives, people with living experience, and a couple agency members as well. So after that pretty intensive review process, it is complete, and there's 3 updated recommendations with a ton of action items involved. So it's just got sent out seriously right before this meeting. If you were a contributor during that day and want to see it, it should be in your inbox now. If it's not, reach out to me and I'm happy to send it to you. Otherwise, it will be published publicly on Monday. And we're doing our best to have physical copies available at the conference. So if you're at the conference, you grab a physical copy of the symposium white paper. And then, of course, I encourage you to come to the symposium this year. That's during our National Impact Week again in September. it was, I think, 75 contributors this time, which is 4 times the amount that went into the last time something like this was made, which was back in 2009. That had about 20 participants in it, and not a lot of living experience represented in it. So that's something I'm really proud of in this document, is that it has so many perspectives, and so many diverse perspectives, and really just covers a lot. I guess my call to action is make sure you're looking out for this year's Impact Week to sign up for that and be a part of the next symposium. Take a look at it, read it when you do get your hands on it, and see like or if you're working for an organization, what work they're doing that's relevant to these recommendations, and maybe how, you know, they support this recommendation or might be informed by the recommendations. And then you guys in particularly are very policy focused. So seeing how this might be relevant to advocating for policy, how you can cite it or bring it to a legislator and say, see, look, the national organization recommends this, the community experts recommend this, and that's what we're trying to accomplish with this bill or with this policy work. So hopefully there's lots of good ways for you to get use out of this, and whether that's for someone else or for yourself, but I hope you enjoy. I'm really happy with it. I don't know what else to say. I think I'm just excited that it's finally out, but I hope you all enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions, if you want to be a part of it next year, if you want to reach out for any reason to learn more. I'm happy to be reached out to.
Thank you, Emma. And yeah, there really isn't too much more to say other than that it's an incredibly easy to digest document. It gets all the points across and all the information across in such a informative and easy way to understand. I think what Emma did really well was, illustrate data very well and chop everything down into easily digestible segments. This is something I'm really excited to share with legislators, particularly because it comes from the community that we serve, and it comes from the people who serve that community. It brings in so many different voices and packages them up in a way that pretty much anyone can understand. I know I will be pumping this out not only to legislators, but people who I hope will join in the symposium next year. I think after seeing this, it's something they'll want to be involved in. If you have any questions at all about that, I'm sure Emma would be happy to help you out. Okay, so now we'll move into the bill section of today's forum. And Jen, I'll let you jump in and kind of give the rundown on what's inside this bill.
Yeah, and many of you are all very familiar with it. You might be able to quote it at this point, because we have been working on this for a while. But the bill as it currently sits is the language that was approved by the Senate Help Committee last year, meaning that the language has clearance, and when it comes back into the Senate Help Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction that it would have to go through to get passed, that's a benefit because that language has already been vetted and cleared by the committee. It's a reauthorization bill that reauthorizes funding that has long since gone away for education awareness services, both in state and local agencies, meaning nonprofits, state agencies, federal agencies, allowing them to move programs forward. It also has a section on building state and tribal systems, looking at creating state advisory councils for how states can look at their existing infrastructure and weave a thread of FASD into that existing infrastructure. And additionally, it reauthorizes the long since dormant Center for Excellence on FASD, which provided technical assistance to the states on how to handle all things FASD and support all things FASD. So I'm excited about it. It's a much more stripped down, pared down bill than it was a few Congresses ago, but I think it really gets to the heart and the core of what we're trying to do here, which is really elevate and support this community and the voices in it. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jen. And so as everyone, I'm sure, is aware, the general status of the bill right now is that it has been introduced in the Senate. and that it has been referred to the Committee of Jurisdiction, which in this case in the Senate is the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, or the HELP Committee. As Jen mentioned, in the 118th Congress, this was a boon for us because it was included in the Support Reauthorization Act. So that our language has been approved, which really clears the road for us a little bit. As we've mentioned a lot, this graph you see in front of us is how a bill normally goes from conception to law. But as we all know, this isn't how it actually works in practice most of the time. There are definitely other ways to becoming a law. The support reauthorization or other packages like that would be one. At the end of the 118th, language from the FASD Respect Act was included in a continuing resolution or a budget bill. That's another way that something become law. And then we're going to talk about this a little bit at the end of the meeting, but something that's going on right now in the policy space is the budget reconciliation project. And we'll talk about how that could potentially get a huge package of bills across the finish line. But before we do that, I want to give Susan a chance to talk about the difference between the language as introduced in the FASD Respect Act. So the FASD Respect Act, we all know, we're all very used to, and that Jen just went over, compared to the provisions that were included in the continuing resolution at the end of last Congress. So just as a quick overview, the House took language from the FASD Respect Act and wanted to include it in that huge continuing resolution at the end of last year that was supported by House and Senate leadership on both sides. And we're going to have Susan go over that because that is also language that has been approved by leadership and is a potential route forward.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And I know that, language, we all start to glaze over, but I think I think it was important to understand what the differences are and how, because obviously we preferred what was recently introduced in the Senate, and that was what was in the Support Reauthorization Act last Congress. But the language that was in the continuing resolution, we've heard more and more from staff, particularly on the House side. That's what the Energy and Commerce staff on the House side prefers. And so and who knows, when all is said and done, who's going to win? We'll take whatever we can get, right? And we've come a long way, and we know that what was in that continuing resolution, everybody had signed off on that. So both House and Senate. So when you're looking at the bill, the language, there are basically two code sections, and we'll talk about the section 399H was original in the code when they passed the first FASD programs back in 1998. And so the Respect Act actually amended some of those code provisions, although they had expired. And if you look at that language, number 1 and number 3 or 4 were language that was tweaked and amended. So that's kind of old. And then we added some language on number 2 having to do with FASD and diagnostic methods. So that's kind of new. But the main section that's important, I think, to all of us and all of you and states is that number 3, which is building FASD state and tribal capacity. And that's where that states are gonna, at some point when this is reauthorized, and funding goes attached to it, states will be able to apply for funding. And so they pretty much took the language from the Respect Act that's been introduced this Congress. So that's pretty much the same. And so as you're looking at your state and the kinds of programs that you would like your state to do, or how you might be involved in what you're doing. These are the provisions. And the number one, I think, is, and I see Sid on the call, is really, really important. And I think it can be sold to your state legislators and departments, is utilizing and adapting existing programs, and that's local programs, that's state programs, federal programs, to include FASD identification and FASD informed support, because they're already getting funding. But how can FASD fit into those programs? And we've talked about that a lot. So that's I think one of the most important, is to put FASD in looking, and Jen was right. There's language in there that will allow the Secretary of HHS to require that you have a task force and that you have an FASD coordinator, but that would be part of their charge, is to begin to look at what is going on in the state and how does FASD work into it. And then the other ones are, as you're doing a task force or whatever you're doing to figure out what's going on, how do you, then that's where you look at developing and expanding screening and diagnostic capacity for FASD in your state. What needs to happen to make that happen? And then you're looking at what programs can be, that are other places that could be developed or implemented and evaluated for intervention programs. And then training, which we all know is really important, but it's something that we can't just solve the problem just with training. We have to have systematic reform. And then dissemination of information about FASD to those affected individuals and families. So that's the crux of the building state and tribal capacity section of the bill. And the next section is a new section, and it's 399I, and that's what will appear in the code. And you don't see the FASD, you don't see the Centers for Excellence. For some reason, the staff for Energy and Commerce did not like the Centers for Excellence. But what they did do was take some of the language that the Centers for Excellence were going to do and continue those provisions. And I forgot to mention, go back to the previous slide, Chris. You'll note, or the previous slide before that, you'll notice that in 399H, go back one more, Chris, if you can. It says shall establish programs which may include. So, and that was frankly what we had to do for the Respect Act. We couldn't require, we didn't put, they have to establish programs, but it's may, it's not shall. So we're going to, obviously, that's when we, once this gets authorized, we want to really have the agency focus on the building FAS. That's the key component. Okay, so, but if you look at this section, it's all of these are programs that the secretary shall award grants. So the secretary doesn't have the discretion to not do these four provisions. And so they were, I know that we talk a lot about there's not enough for intervention, but they want to continue to do that public education and awareness of risks of prenatal alcohol exposure, and then provide that clearinghouse for best practices and evidence-based prevention and identification. So, and that would be something that the states could utilize in their efforts, that clearinghouse and getting the best. And then providing awareness and understanding, and that's basically training of prevention and best practices. So this includes both prevention and intervention, which I think is really, really important because we don't have that under current authorization. And then number 4 is providing technical assistance to any of the grants that are where if you were to get a building FASD state and tribal system, that this would provide technical assistance to those grants, and that would help them for developing programs or whatever it is that needed to happen to help them develop their programs. So those, I just thought it would be helpful to understand how this one is a little bit different than the Respect Act. So if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat or and we can.
Susan, I have a question for you right
Sure.
off the bat, actually.
Sure.
You might not have an answer.
Oh, that's okay.
But it seems like this 399I provision has all the mechanisms that the Center for Excellence would have to make sure that, you know, programs are in place and capacity is raised. Again, you might not know. Why do you think that the language, the Centers for Excellence language isn't included, but all of the mechanisms are?
Okay, the only thing that I can say about that is what Cassidy said from Senator Murkowski's office, because the previous FASD Center for Excellence was in SAMHSA. They didn't want to have that language, and to me it didn't make any sense, but that was the only explanation that she gave me. The one piece that's missing in this section that we had in the Center for Excellence was the one that I think the big one was diagnostic capacity. So the Center for Excellence was going to be you know, that was grants for expanding or diagnostic capacity. They did not want to have grants for that. I think what the thought behind that is that they wanted the states to work on that. But I could see number 4 being the technical assistance to help states with diagnostic capacity. It doesn't say that, but obviously, but they didn't want to give out grants for doing that. They want the states to do that.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And I definitely want to give anyone else who has questions for Susan or anyone else some time. I do want to add that some encouraging news out of states is that I think 3 of the bills introduced at the state level already that mirror or parallel the FASD Respect Act do include provisions to build diagnostic capacity. So I'm glad that it is being addressed there. One of the great things that's happening right now with the state work, and I'm sure anyone who's been in a meeting knows this, a lot of times in meetings on the federal level, they ask what's happening at the state level meetings, they ask what's happening at the federal level. We can now say that there's something happening at both levels and that this is something that needs to be addressed both at the federal and state level. It's not something that one or the other can handle. And the feedback we've gotten so far is extremely positive, knowing that both levels are working towards that.
Yeah, and I do want to say, you know, and I know that I'm I'm an optimistic person, but what the comments we're getting, and this is from the Republican staff, is that there's a lot of support behind these health provisions that were in the CR. And so that it's something that could be done on an expedited basis and not included in a big bill, that they would just, so I'm optimistic that and it would be, so it would be this language, it wouldn't be the Respect Act language. But and I don't want that to discourage advocates from supporting the Respect Act, because we need that. You know, they need to know that there's support behind the Respect Act. We have a question.
Yeah, Liz, what's your question?
Liz?
Hi, everybody. I'm curious about this, and maybe we're just kind of in the weeds and all of a sudden I had an aha moment or something, but can you describe like the 1 through 4 items listed here, I'm trying to get in my head around at the federal level, what is structurally going to be created at the federal level versus what is funding at the federal level that then will be created structurally at the state level? I hope my question makes sense.
Well, okay, so there's nothing that's being created at the federal level. These are all, these will include grants, contracts or agreements to public or nonprofit, private entities with demonstrated expertise in the field of FASD. So it will be the federal government making grants with regard to these items.
Okay.
To those entities, and they have to have demonstrated expertise in the field of FASD.
So to say it sort of from a layman's terms, these are buckets of money to some extent, and somebody with some level of expertise at the federal level is going to be accepting grants or giving grants to state entities that apply. And that person at the federal level is going to have some level of expertise to know that those things are going to be met as they apply for these grants in these different areas. Is that right?
Yeah, well, and that's
Okay.
kind of, what's this, Center for Disease Control has funding now, has 11.5 million now for giving out grants. And HRSA has one, so this is not new. But it goes, but it's going, so public or private entities, public or nonprofit private entities with demonstrated expertise. So they
Okay.
would put out an RFP, right? And any groups around the country with FASD expertise demonstrated could apply for grants in these areas.
To
And that would
work in
be-
a particular state, or does it matter that what state they're
No,
working in?
no, and it'll be an open request for
Okay.
proposal, and they'll, so it's not really any different, but it's, I mean, there's this is new language for the, and it's not set in this language as to which agency within HHS. It's the secretary is going to make that determination. So it could be, my guess, CDC would be the top agency because that's where
Okay.
most of the money is now, but hers is certainly, and then SAMHSA had the Center for Excellence. So, I mean, ever since we've been working on this, there's been that discussion as to which agency is the best one. And I would say that the Center for Excellence was, at SAMHSA, but it was in the wrong section of SAMHSA. It was in the prevention side of SAMHSA rather than the treatment. So it wasn't a good fit. And I think that was part of the reason that it went by the wayside. But
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
those are good questions because you see these words and you think, well, how are people, how's that going to make a difference? Is the federal government going to, but it's organizations with demonstrated FASD expertise can apply for this funding, these buckets.
And I think that's an important consideration too, because what we don't want to have happen is to have, what they call the Beltway bandits or the big government services contracting agencies going after this funding and then wasting a lot of money getting up to speed on FASD. There are some government contracting agencies that currently work in that space. Hey, awesome. We just don't want to see a wasting of funds. And taking just one quick step back too to something that Chris mentioned, and I think this is really important, that the advocating we do on the Hill for the FASD Respect Act is not mutually exclusive of this. Anything we do to promote the FASD Respect Act helps this language, helps move this language forward. So whether things get passed through this mechanism or they get passed through the FASD Respect Act, doesn't matter. How we advocate, really the easiest, simplest, most straightforward way that legislators are going to listen to you is by advocating for the FASD Respect Act. And that doesn't mean that you're not supporting this other language. As a matter of fact, that actually really helps it. That's our vehicle for getting in front of legislators and talking about this issue. So just
Well, and I would
sorry,
have
go
to
ahead.
say, Jen, I know that, it looks a little different than the Respect Act, but in practical terms, it really is not any different. It's going to get programmed, it's going to get funding out there to the states and to, entities that have FASD expertise on prevention, intervention, and identification. So,
And when there's funding, state systems can get involved.
right.
And that's really what we're hoping for with this is how can we get, the state departments of health, the, whoever's handling foster care in the state, whoever's handling disability in the state, how can we get them involved? And those state agencies aren't going to get involved without funding. So this is a mechanism to help get them involved and help build systemic change, not just have, an organization get funding and then do some training, right? Don't leave it at that because, we can train, but then only the people you've trained are there knowing about things. And how long is that going to stick with them? So training needs to be a part of this, but not all of this. And I think how this is positioned can really help move things within state agencies to get them involved. And I think that has the capacity for building some pretty good change.
Could I ask just one other question? It made me think of it when you were talking, Jen. I remember in the FASD Respect Act, there was the full, view that there was language at such sums as, I can't remember the term you guys use, but what is the difference between that and what's in the CR? Is that the same or is it different?
Liz,
just-
you ask the best questions. I gotta
Okay.
say, I just want to give a round of applause for Liz because I love Liz's questions. Susan,
Thank
you want to take that one?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, and we had a lot of discussion about this with staff and also advocates because there were some Republicans well, there was a difference. Some wanted just such sums, but they didn't want, and then there were some Republicans that didn't want to have it open-ended. So this language actually includes, basically, it's the current federal appropriation, which is $12.5 million. And that's 11.5 at CDC and 1 million at HRSA. So it includes 12.5 million, and it's going to be up to us once this authorization passes they can't do all this with $12.5 million, right? So then that's the next process. This is the authorization, and then you go for the appropriation. Okay. Good question, though.
Do we have any other questions on language differences before we move into what's happening and what's happened? Awesome. Well, thank you, Susan. Do you have anything to add before we switch
Nope.
gears a little bit?
I hope it didn't bore people too much and gave them a little bit of information. I think either one, like I said, we would be thrilled to have either bill. So I know people are upset that it does, or may be upset because it doesn't have the center, but I think the pieces are all there to make it work.
Okay, so now we're moving into so what's happening? What happened in February? What's happening looking ahead and how that affects the work that we're all doing right now? Just a quick overview of what happened and where we're at. We currently have 9 co-sponsors on the Senate bill, with the most recent co-sponsors being Senators Gary Peters and Susan Collins. Both are returning co-sponsors. Gary Peters co-sponsored pretty late in the game during the 118th, and Susan Collins has been a strong supporter. I believe in the 118th, every legislator from Maine signed on, and Angus King, the other senator, even joined us at our gala. So that was great. We had a few federal level meetings. Earlier in the month, we met with Senator Bill Cassidy, who chairs the HELP committee. We were able to meet with his committee staff, which was great, just to get a little update of what their priorities are and give them some updates on how the end of the 118th session went for us. We also had a meeting with his colleague from the House, also from Louisiana, Speaker Johnson. That was just to educate somebody who's obviously very influential within Congress. The information that we gleaned from that was that Speaker Johnson likes to let his committee chairs kind of govern their own business, essentially. The staff made it known that it was encouraging that we were included in the Support Act last year, also in the CR, as we've been talking about. And he was also happy to know that we were meeting with Buddy Carter, who chairs the Health Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and that we will be meeting with Representative Guthrie, who chairs the entire Energy and Commerce Committee shortly. Just want to check the chat very quickly. Susan, thanks for answering Traeger in the chat there.
Yeah.
On the state level, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. We had a great meeting with Illinois State Rep Jed Davis that was attended by a group of advocates. Traeger, I saw that you're here, so I'll ask you to come on and have a really quick conversation with me in just a minute, if that's okay. We also were able to meet with Texas State Rep Anna Hernandez's staff. His name is Chris. He is the one responsible for introduction of a Texas bill. That's HB 2219 that will include FASD as a qualifying condition for special education. What I want to add about that is that he is, as a staffer, has introduced legislation on developmental disabilities every year that he's been in the building there in Texas. And the reason that he introduced with his boss this piece of FASD legislation was because he was attending a child welfare event at the end of last year in December and heard a group of advocates speak about FASD, their experience as parents and their living experience, and decided that that was going to be his project for the next Congress. So thank you so much to the Texas group. I told some of the Texas advocates that, and they couldn't believe that it was, something like that got the ball rolling there. Should add that that same Texas group is working on a fairly comprehensive bill that will mirror the FASD Respect Act and will allow them to set up their advisory committee and have that mechanism to receive funding. And in Kansas, they deserve their own bullet point for this because they have had, I believe, 4 different bills introduced in the state legislature that have to do with FASD, with the 2 most recent ones. One will declare September 9th as Kansas FASD Day. That means that we won't have to go back to them every year and get a governor's proclamation. This will be written in there. And the other one will set up the FASD task force, which is crucial moving forward, as we know. At this time, I would really appreciate it if Kat Meinhardt wouldn't mind coming off mute and having just a really quick conversation with me about these bills in Kansas, because I know she's been influential in what's going on there.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Hi.
I love to share.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Bill, first of all, thank you so much for just bringing all of this to my attention. It's always great when I get an email saying 2 more bills. I love that. Do you mind just giving yourself a quick introduction here for the group who may not know you?
Sure. So I am the president of the Kansas FASD Support Network. We have been an affiliate, I think, for, 3 or 4 years now. Had helped found that. And I'm also the CEO of Dream Acres, another Kansas affiliate. And we provide supported living and on-site jobs for adults that have an FASD.
Excellent. Thank you, Kat. So just to get the lay of the land a little bit and understand what was going on in the background for these bills, what role did you play in educating this particular champion, or how did the process of connecting with the legislator even start for you?
Well, another one is the vice president of the support network. He happens to know this legislature, so we met with her, this representative, last year. And he was like, hey, let's come back together after elections. You know, she intrigued. We sat and educated her. She had no idea. Education is her background. And she sits on education committees and things like that. So she had no idea at all about, you know, really what the need is out there. So being able to talk with her and get that ball rolling last year was instrumental. And then we came together again probably about 6 weeks ago, and she said, "Okay, you know, pie in the sky. What do you guys want?" And so we just sat and listed. Jonathan and I just sat there and listed off, um, you know, hey, let's have this, let's have this, let's have this. And she said, "All right, let me take all this," and I you know, let me take it and see what we can do. And you know, she decided, came back to us and said, "Hey, I am gonna make FASD my project this session." You know, she's had other topics that are points at her heart, but and she went full on. Like we had no idea what really she was. She did. She took it and ran. So.
That is fantastic. So it sounds like it wasn't, an overnight, you snapped your fingers and you had these bills written, planted the seed, had the conversations for education, and there was some follow-up. It sounds like the process for crafting the bills is fairly collaborative. Besides your just experience and knowledge, what else did you pull from, or what resources did you provide for them to start drafting?
We provided we went to the policy website. Okay. We went, oh, we're not going to duplicate it. We're going to work smarter, right? I pulled out every state legislature that has already passed across our country, all the ones that are being drafted, and I just provided it all, right to her. Here it is. Here's samples. Here's our federal bill as well. This is what, and that was, I think, key, being able to say, look, here's our federal bill. We want to get in the forefront of this legislation coming. We want the money coming to Kansas when the opportunity is. So let's get ahead of the ball, and that's where our discussion about the task force was like, hey, if we get this going now, we're going to be set and ready when this passes. And so that was another key.
I think that's the critical point there, to be ready when this passes. And I know this is easy for me to say as someone who's, so deep into this issue, but this seems like it should be an easy win for state legislators to bring back. They're bringing money to their constituency, they're bringing money to their district, and they're supporting families and individuals. I think when it's framed that way, especially paired with the work that's being done on the federal level, it's fairly common sense, and we've seen it working. I just want to add, I think it's fantastic that you had that built-in relationship with a legislator, and I know so the same thing is happening in Texas with one of their bills. They knew someone essentially. I want to add that in Illinois with state Illinois Representative Jed Davis, no relationship. That was a parent who wasn't getting support, reached out to someone who was supposed to give them support, and receive that support, which I think is just absolutely fantastic.
And that's probably one of my best recommendations is reach out, look up your state representatives, see who's on your education committees, and see and call them up. You might not have a friend or a friend of a friend who is a representative, but go to those, because you can go to your state website and look at who is on those committees as to where where's the heart of that person on those committees. And I mean, I'm lucky, I'm in Topeka, so I'm in our capital. It's easy for me to be able to go to a committee, and anytime I can go and testify related, and I make FASD related in a lot of different committees. It's important, so I've been doing that for a little over a year now, just wherever I can fit in public comment and testimony. I think it starts that awareness for your state representatives.
Well, thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate that. I have some questions that I want to throw over to Michelle Traeger, but I do want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else you wanted to add about the experience so far.
No, it's great. Like I said, it's been pretty exciting. We do have the 4 bills. One will require all of our teachers in the preparatory schools to um, include instruction on FASD for all of our educational staff. We have one that is changing the definition under OHI for special ed to specifically include FASD. And then the task force one and the September 9th day. So, and don't be afraid if somebody, if you start talking, give them that pie in the sky. Cause I had no idea. Literally, it was one morning I woke up my email and here's the first 2 bills. And then a week later I was researching something else and these other 2 bills popped up on the state legislative page. So I had no idea.
Excellent. And something similar happened in Illinois. Again, a parent, an advocate was asked, what do you need? And they gave them the FASD Respect Act and a bunch of other policy agenda points. And Representative Jed Davis out of Illinois, who has a better idea than we do, and then the parent did, of what will actually pass, what flies as legislation, took that and condensed it into a bill. And Michelle, I'll ask you to come off mute if you don't mind, because I think your reaction was, wow, this bill seems almost too big and there's too much in there. I hope a lot of it gets passed. And I do have a couple questions for you, if that's okay, Traeger.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Just so for anyone who doesn't know, we again met with Representative Jed Davis. Traeger, I think that meeting was about an hour long. He was very open and personable. And I know it wasn't you who got the ball rolling on this, but can you just fill us in on how the process got started?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Rep Davis, his district, like he's so close to me geographically, but the way our lines are drawn, the high school my kids go to is in his district, but my house is not. And there's another mom who's actually geographically further away, but she's on the very edge of his district. And so she had actually developed a relationship with him because her child is a young adult, I believe 18. And they've been through years and years of, residential treatments and lots of providers and involvement with state systems and not getting responses from them. And so she'd gone to the person who was the rep previously in this district and hadn't really gotten much support. And then when Davis was elected a couple years ago, she was talking to him and he's, kept open communication with her. And she actually took the FASD Respect Act language to him. And he said, yeah, let's throw it in a bill. And he happened to be doing a package of youth and children focused bills. There's like 12 of them. And this is one of them. And it is really big. And Chris, if you want me to, I can copy it and I can put it in the chat if people are curious to see what it looks like. And I won't read the whole summary, but it's basically designating an FASD state coordinator and really having like a whole program there at the state. And then using that language from the Respect Act, using existing federal or state programs to include FASD identification and FASD informed support, and then expanding screening diagnostic capacity, having a state coordinator and having a state advisory committee. I think that's the biggest part of it that we haven't seen before. And then for us, it would reside in our DHS, Department of Human Services. So I'm going to just put the link to that in the chat in case anyone wants to look at it. So it was just introduced and, I've been keeping track of it. It hasn't been assigned to a committee yet. So in Illinois, the way it works is that once it gets assigned to a committee, which it might be the Adoption and Child Welfare Committee, it might be Mental Health and Substances Committee, then you can start submitting what they say are witness slips. And
Yeah,
and then
that
you're
leads me
trying
to my next question for you, actually. That's
Okay.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Before we get to that though, I know with him it was quite easy to do this, to find common ground, I thought. What made it so easy to find common ground with him? What was the connection that you were able to find?
Well, I think yeah, again, it was Nicole that made that connection with him. And he actually, I mean, politically, he's very conservative, but his family has been fostering, he said mostly infants. They've been doing so for a number of years. Although right now they do have an older elementary age child that they're fostering. And so from that experience and background, he, I think, very instantly easily had empathy for that situation for Nicole as an adoptive parent, which was great. So that was a good starting point. And then during our call with him, because it was adoptive parents on that call, I just wanted to be sure to include our birth parents as being part of the advocacy and part of the support as well. So yeah, I mean, I shared with him, because it is asking for a lot, that my hope is that it doesn't get amended and amended and amended to where the only thing the legislature wants to do is say we're going to approve prevention measures.
Right. Yeah. And I was so glad that you and the other advocates made the point to say that, prevention has to be tempered by support. We need to be supporting individuals. And he gave us some actionable directives. I don't know if you remember those, but do you mind sharing them? Just to he gave us these action steps to take to ensure that the bill we want and need passed is the one that gets passed. What were those?
So, and you can jump in, Chris. I think the biggest one was wait and see what, when it gets assigned to a specific committee. And at that point, we can start asking people to submit what we call witness slips. You don't have to go to the capital of our state in person. It's very easy to do online. There's like a link you can do online. And so in the meantime, while waiting for that, I've just been communicating with like other parents in the state that I've been working with, other entities, like letting them know, hey, this is coming up. We actually have, unrelated, but Barb Clark, who a lot of you know, is going to be doing a training in Illinois, and it's going to be free based on a grant that she got. So we're going to be able to invite like caregivers, but also providers from different systems, and that's going to be later in the year. So I think it's exciting to be able to kind of bring that up with it and say, like, because it shows momentum, right? It shows momentum. And what Chris did on that call with us too was bringing up the other states that are also having, and I felt like Representative Davis was really appreciative to hear that there were other states that are going in that same direction that seemed to sort of have meaning for him. And then, for me, Nicole was the one who made this contact with him, and he's in the House side of the Illinois Assembly. My contacts happen to be on the Senate side from having done previous, like testifying for the Mental Health and Behavior Committee in the Senate side. So I'm going to go to my contacts on that side and just, once it gets assigned to committee, and say, hey, this is coming along, and we really want it to be supported in both houses, and we really want it to be supported bipartisan. So it's kind of like a wait and see for now. And then the other thing was, it's crazy. We do have an appellate court justice here in Illinois, and he was very active. He's a parent of a child on the FA spectrum himself. And like literally 15 years ago, he got a law passed in Illinois, and I don't know if it's still active, that in the public schools, when they do sex education as part of the health class, they are supposed to talk about prevention and of pregnancy exposed to substances and alcohol. But that was 15 years ago. So, but he still is active. A few years ago, he published a quick letter in the Capitol newspaper, just saying that in the legal system, they need to be aware of FASD. So I don't know if he's aware that this bill is being proposed. So because if he could do a witness slip, that might be that might be interesting. And plus, I happen to know politically, he's like on the same side as this particular rep. So, so that might mean something too. I don't know, but it's
I
trying
think
to
so,
put
yeah.
all those pieces together.
And I thought it was very encouraging that he gave us those action steps. It wasn't just a hang back, I got this. It was, here are the actual steps you can take. And I think it's worth noting that the testimony doesn't have to strictly come from within the state. He mentioned that, you know, Illinois, if you're a caregiver, if you're an individual with FASD, it should come from Illinois. If you're a professional, if you have professional experience in any capacity, they want to know. Or if you're working to get laws passed in a different state, they want to know what that looks like. So I'm very hopeful with that, and I do think that you hit the nail on the head with the task force and the coordinator. If those were to get passed, I think we'd be in a good spot to move forward.
And I think that's like our biggest thing here in Illinois is, you know, I can't believe I hadn't run like cross paths with this other mom before. It was like incomprehensible to me that we didn't already know each other. So, and we connected just a couple days ago just to be like, okay, nothing's happened on this yet. So to be ready, if it does, you know, in whatever capacity it does pass, to be able to at least say, like, here's some people who would be, because that was another thing we told Rep Davis. We don't want that to pass. And then those spots, like the coordinator and the people on the committee, the advisor committee, to just get filled by people who are appointed, who have had no experience or very little experience, who haven't been working in this for a couple of years. And I think he listened to that too. And I think that's kind of our goal, is to stay in communication with him. So if we do get this passed, that we can have some say in how those committees are formed and what that looks like. And we might already know some of the agencies to reach out to start with being FASD informed. So yeah, so that's, and Susan, you know, you were on Karen Conti's radio show like half a year ago. And so I'm going to let her know about this too, because she's been a supporter of FASD and she probably isn't aware that this has come up yet. And I think she, you know, she might be like happy to support that too. So just trying to think of all the different connections we've made. They're all kind of out there, but we're not like all unified yet. So
yeah, now's the perfect time to do that. You and like everyone else on this call has been doing work on this for so long. Now is not the time to kind of sit back and see what happens. It's important to make sure that we're connecting everything. But thank you so much. And thank you, Kat, as well, for the updates. I hope everyone finds this, if not interesting, at least helpful to know what other states are doing and the successes that they're having. Knowing that it's possible, I'm more than happy to help. I'm really enjoying the state work and finding out how each different state legislator works. There's just tons of information in there. I know we're at the hour now, but I just very quickly, I'm going to skip the budget process. I'll do a quick thing on that on Friday when I post to our website and to Facebook. But there are plenty of ways that we can advocate right now without a House bill, with the current text that we have. The main way is the same as it always is. It's education, meeting with legislators, advocating for the FASD Respect Act in the Senate, educating on FASD in the House, making sure that everyone is aware of FASD and know that we're here and that we're moving in the right direction. Your communication is really important, especially if you are a professional subject matter expert or have a unique experience as an individual or caretaker. That can come in the form of an op-ed or a letter to the editor. I'm happy to, in the next month or so, if anyone's interested, having you know, a short work group where we look into when it's appropriate to write an op-ed or letter to the editor, how to do that. I know you're all extremely busy, so sitting down to write a 700-page op-ed might not be high priority, but your experience is extremely vital. On the state level, Melissa Cook, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing. I wanted to have a conversation with you today as well, but we're running out of time. You don't have to meet with just your legislators. Reach out to your Department of Health. I'm doing it here at FASD United, but it's always helpful if someone from the state does it. They'll send you to the right person to make sure that information is included on their websites, or connect you with who you need to actually get the ball rolling on policy. And finally, March 15th through 23rd, both the House and the Senate will not be in session, meaning that your legislators will likely be in district. If they are brave enough to have town halls in this political climate, feel free to seek one of those out and join. I'll try to keep everyone aware of that. But if anyone wants to meet with their reps in district, March 15th and 23rd is the next opportunity everyone will have. Just want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you're looking for updated documents, everything is now updated on our website for the 119th Congress. Letter of support to go out to endorse organizations to endorse has been updated as well. That's on the same website, same link as before. I'm sending everything out to past endorsers, but it would mean a lot to come from you in the States as well. And as always, please feel free to join us at our weekly drop-ins at noon every Wednesday. That's noon Eastern every Wednesday, except for the last Wednesday. And Traeger, thank you. The QR code will have to be updated, but the other links leading to that are in there. Jen or Susan, do you have any parting words before we let everyone go a few minutes late?
Well, I just want to say, when I think, and I've said this before, when I think back to where we were when we got started, and the effort that you guys are making on the state level is just incredible. And that's, we didn't plan it that way, but it's evolved, and that's the way it's going to have, it's going to have to work that way. We can't just do it on the federal level. It has to coordinate and work that way. So thank you all for being with us on this journey.
Yes, thank you all, and we'll see you all next month or hopefully next week on our drop-in.